Good morning, children. So let us utilize this time for your social class, right? As it is quite lengthy, especially the history portion. So in the previous class, we were discussing up till we had discussed until page number 201, colonial education after Wood's dispatch, right? We finished this topic. So let us start the next topic. That's traditional versus modern education system. So let me read and find out what is there. Let us now compare the traditional and modern system of education. The traditional system of education had the following characteristics. A traditional school did not have any of the features that you see in school nowadays. There were no classrooms, no textbooks, no roll call, not even school buildings. Schools were very often organized around one teacher. The traditional schools were based on the requirements of the local people and run by them. In a sense, they only taught you as much as you needed to learn. They were very affordable and it was not always necessary to pay fee in cash. They were based in the local life cycles. Thus, the school would not be held during harvest. This suited the rural children. Learning was in local language and traditional knowledge was imparted. Till the middle of the 19th century, the colonial ruler were mostly concerned. I'm just marking the key points, so even you can do the same as I'm reading. Till the middle of the 19th century, the colonial rulers were mostly concerned with higher education, but after the Woods Dispatch, they began to concentrate on vernacular education as well. Now, let us see this in comparison with this, what do you call the modern education system. So, let us take a look at some of the changes they were able to bring about in the realm of education in India. Government appointed pundits in charge of 4 or 5 schools. I believe it will be Pandit, right? Pundits. It was their job to go around the school and make sure that the teaching was of a certain standard and that classes were taken as per a timetable. All right. I'll be explaining you. I'm just reading now. They submitted periodic reports to the government. You mean the British government, right? There was thus the beginning of state supervision of education. Education no longer remained a local or regional affair. The format of teaching changed completely. Teaching was done through textbooks. Students were expected to attend schools regularly, pay fixed monthly, and appear for exams to test their ability. School buildings came up, and a new type of discipline was imposed. The schools which followed these rules were supported and funded by the government. State funding of education started, independent pathshalas lost favor. Because of the year round teaching cycle, many rural families found it difficult to send their children to school. On the positive side, girls were encouraged to attend school. Okay, now what was the overall impact, okay, of the colonial education policies? Let's see that. The policies which was introduced by the Britishers in terms of education, what did it result to? Impact of it. The growth of education was not uniform at all levels. More attention was paid to the expansion of high schools and colleges. Pathshalas which accepted the new rules were supported by the government grants. Those who were unwilling to work within the new system received no government grant. The new education system neglected education of the masses. Because education was more expensive, only the rich and the urban people could afford it. The new system demanded regular attendance in the schools even during the harvest season. Otherwise, students were not allowed to continue in the school. English medium education neglected the study of the Indian literature, history, law, and philosophy. Scientific and technical education for Indians was also neglected. Educational institutions came up to came to be set up mainly in the urban areas, and there was still effort made to educate girls. English education brought the Indians into contact with rational and scientific ideas. And with the development in science and technology, Indians became familiar with the writings of great thinkers which inspired the Indian national movement. English, that emerged as the common language among the educated Indians, helped to spread new ideas among common people living in different parts of India and created bonds of unity among them. Alright, so let us discuss this. The main key points. First of all, when we compare this traditional as with the modern education system, so let us first discuss that what were the characteristics of the traditional education system. Now, traditional schools, they did not have any kind of classrooms, textbooks, or the so-called it was not that attendance was must. Neither they had any kind of a school building. Schools where the term school was just around, it was organized around one teacher. And the traditional schools were also based as per the book. Okay, the traditional schools were also based on the requirement of the local people, as and also run by them. Okay, in a sense, like now in the requirement of the local people, in a sense, like it only that much was taught, how much they thought that the student needs to learn. But however, traditional schools were affordable. It was not necessary, that you need to pay the fee in cash. I have already explained about with this matter to you in the previous class as well. Uh, Traditional schools were based in a kind of a local life cycle. Like basically, there are certain months or season of harvesting. So during harvest, the schools would not be held. So as a result, the rural children, they can go for harvesting. Now, learning was mainly in local language, and traditional knowledge was imparted to them until the middle of the 19th century. 19th century, that means around 1850, something like that. Until the middle of the 19th century, the British rulers, they were mainly concerned with only with the higher education. But after this, we saw in the previous class that Wood's dispatch number 49, correct? Now, after that, the British government, the British ruler, they also began to concentrate on the vernacular education as well. Now, what did this? What were the changes that the colonial rulers brought, or the colonial government? The British government, they appointed this pundits, like kind of an in charge of 4 to 5 schools. Now, it was the job of these pundits to go around the school and make sure that the teaching was of a certain standard, and also for which these pundits were supposed to submit a periodic report to the British government. Okay, so thus it was from there, you can say that the state supervision of education started. The format of teaching also completely changed. Teaching now, earlier as I told you that there was no textbook, no classroom, no school building, but however now it was done through textbooks. Students were expected to attend the school regularly. Even they had to pay a fixed monthly and appear for examination as well, so that in order to test their ability. School buildings came up, and discipline was imposed. But the British government, they had some terms and conditions. Whichever schools followed their rules, those were supported by the British government. So you can say that state funding. This is from the idea from where state funding of education started. But remember the pathshalas and maktabs and all, which we discussed, the traditional form of schools, those started losing their favor. And since the now the mode of education was based on a year round teaching cycle, so many of the rural families also found it difficult to send their children to school, especially during the harvesting season. But on a positive note, girls were encouraged to attend schools, which earlier, if you go to the first two, three paragraphs that we read, that it was written that girls were not allowed to attend schools and all in the traditional education system. Now, the impact of this was that No matter Britishers introduced several norms, but however, the growth of education was not equal at all levels. Hmm? Special attention was paid only in the expansion of high schools and colleges. And those pathshalas which accepted the new rules, they were supported by the government funding, government grants and all. But if any of them they are unwilling to work within the new norms, then there will be no government aid from them. The new education system also neglected the masses, the education of the large group of people, as because education was more expensive. So in a simple term, only those people, those who were rich, they could afford, and it was mainly the urban people who could afford. And as I told you that the new system demanded regular attendance in the school, especially and also during the harvest season. So otherwise, if you are not regular, students were not allowed to continue in the school. English English medium education, they neglected the study of this Indian literature, Indian history, law, philosophy, and all. And even scientific and technical education were not imparted to the Indians. Educational institution came to be set up mainly in the urban areas. Yes, girls were allowed, but however, there was very little effort made to educate the girls. Now, because of the English education, as the book says, the last point, it brought the Indians into contact with the rational, means logical and scientific ideas because of English education. Indians became familiar with the writing of the great thinkers and because of the English education, it says, and as a result, this inspired the Indian national movement. English became a common language among the educated Indian, which also helped to spread new ideas among common people living in different parts of India. Basically, as different parts of India had different vernacular languages, so as English became a common language, so it was easy to spread ideas, and also it created a bond of unity among them. Next, national education. From the early 19th century, many thinkers from different parts of India began to feel that Western education would help modernize India. They urged the British to open more schools, colleges, and universities and spend more money on education. This trend is best exemplified in Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who forcefully articulated the benefits of the Western education. Yet there were some Indians like Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, who did not like the British educational system. They began to question British education policy as the nationalist movement gathered momentum, particularly after the partition of Bengal and beginning of Swadeshi and boycott movements. Many other Indians also began to not only question the education policies of the British government but also advocated their boycott. Moreover, during the anti partition movement, students had been very active. This appeared to have angered the British authorities, and they expelled many students from their schools and colleges.